The demographic features of the population of Japan include population density, ethnicity, education level, health of the populace, economic status, religious affiliations and other aspects regarding the population. Based on the census from October 2010, Japan's population was at one of its peaks €128,057,352. As of March 2012, the population estimate was 127,650,000, making it the world's 10th most populous country. Current statistics do not showcase much difference in population numbers. Japan's population size can be attributed to high growth rates experienced during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In recent years, Japan has experienced net population loss due to falling birth rates and almost no net immigration, despite having one of the highest life expectancies in the world at 81.25 years of age as of 2006. Using the annual estimate for October of each year, the population peaked in 2008 at 128,083,960 and had fallen 285,256 by October 2011. Japan's population density was 336 people per square kilometer. Based on the Health and Welfare Ministry estimation released in January 2012, Japan's population will keep declining by about 1 million people every year in the coming decades, which will leave Japan with a population of 87 million in 2060. By that time, more than 40% of the population is expected to be over age 65. In 2012, the population for a sixth straight year of declines by 212,000 is the biggest drop on record since 1947 and also a record low of 1.03 million births. In 2013, a new record of population drop happened with 244,000 people. Today more than 20% of the population are aged 65 and over. The population ranking of Japan dropped from 7th to 8th in 1990, to 9th in 1998, and to 10th since. Population, census. Japan collects census information every 5 years. The exercise is conducted by the Statistics Bureau of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. Population density. Japan's population density is 336 people per square kilometer according to the UN World Populations Prospectus of July 2005. It ranks 37th in a list of countries by population density, ranking directly above India and directly below Belgium. Between 1955 and 1989, land prices in the 6 largest cities increased 15,000%. Urban land prices generally increased 40% from 1980 to 1987. In the 6 largest cities, the price of land doubled over that period. For many families, this trend put housing in central cities out of reach. The result was lengthy commutes for many workers. Daily commutes of 2 hours each way are not uncommon in the Tokyo area. After a decade of declining land prices, residents have been moving back into central city areas, as evidenced by 2005 census figures. Despite the large amount of forested land in Japan, parks in cities are smaller and scarcer than in major West European or North American cities, which average 10 times the amount of parkland per inhabitant. National and regional governments devote resources to making regional cities and rural areas more attractive by developing transportation networks, social services, industry, and educational institutions in attempts to decentralize settlement and improve the quality of life. Nevertheless, major cities, especially Tokyo, Yokohama, and Chiba and, to a lesser extent, Kyoto, Osaka and Kobe, remain attractive to young people seeking education and jobs. Urban distribution. Japan is an urban society with about only 5% of the labor force working in agriculture. Many farmers supplement their income with part-time jobs in nearby towns and cities. About 80 million of the urban population is heavily concentrated on the Pacific shore of Honshu. Metropolitan Tokyo Yokohama, with its population of 35 million residents, is the world's most populous city. Japan faces the same problems that confront urban industrialized societies throughout the world: overcrowded cities and congested highways. Aging of Japan. Like other post-industrial countries, Japan faces the benefits as well as potential drawbacks associated with an aging population. While countries with young populations may wrestle with problems of crime, poverty, and social unrest, countries with older populations often enjoy higher standards of living. However, the demographic shift in Japan's age profile has triggered concerns about the nation's economic future and the viability of its welfare state. In 1989, only 11.6% of the population was 65 years or older, but by 2007, that figure had risen to 21.2%, making Japan one of the grayest countries on Earth. Demographic statistics from the CIA World Factbook: population in 5 households, 78.7% in urban areas. High population density: 329.5 persons per square kilometer for total area. 1,523 persons per square kilometer for habitable land. More than 50% of population lives on 2% of land. Sex ratio: 2010ist, at birth, 1.056 male, s/female, under 15 years, 1.06 male, s/female, 15 to 64 years, 1.02 male, s/female, 65 years and over, 0.74 male, s/female, total population, 0.95 male, s/female, 2006ist, at birth, 1.05 male, s/female, under 15 years, 1.05 male, s/female, 15 to 64 years, 1.01 male, s/female, 65 years and over, 0.73 male, s/female, total population, 0.95 male, s/female, HIV/AIDS, adult prevalence rate, less than 0.1%, people living with HIV/AIDS, 9,600, 12,000, deaths, fewer than 100, 500, ethnic groups. 98.5% Japanese citizens and 1.5% foreign citizens. The concept of the ethnic groups by the Japanese statistics is different from the ethnicity census of North American, Australasian, Brazilian or some Western European statistics. For example, the United Kingdom census asks ethnic or racial background, which composites the population of the United Kingdom, regardless of their nationalities. The Japanese Statistics Bureau, however, does not have this question yet. Since the Japanese population census asks the people's nationality rather than their ethnic background, naturalized Japanese citizens and Japanese nationals with multi-ethnic background are considered to be ethnically Japanese in the population census of Japan. Thus, in spite of the widespread belief that Japan is ethnically homogeneous, at least one academic recommends description of it as a multi-ethnic society. Internal to Japan, a distinction between Polynesian-type Jomon and continental-type Yayoi is sometimes observed, although the populous shorthand does not actually reflect the observed 90% Yayoi/10% Jomon haploid group frequency of modern Japanese DNA. Foreign citizens: more than 2.5 million foreigners live in Japan. The number has grown by 14.9% in 5 years. The two largest sources of foreign citizens in Japan are 0.53 million North and South Koreans and 0.67 million Chinese, followed by smaller numbers of Filipinos and Brazilians. Other nationalities include Americans, Canadians, Australians, British, Indonesians, Thais, South Africans, Nigerians, Iranians, Russians, Turks, Indians and European Union nationals. Historically, the largest number of foreign citizens in Japan were Japanese-born people of Korean ancestry. In recent years, Korean-born Koreans have come to outnumber Japanese-born Koreans, and Koreans, whether foreign or Japanese-born, are now substantially outnumbered by Chinese. Indeed, if only foreign-born foreign nationals are considered, the long-term foreign resident population of Japan can justifiably be described as predominantly Chinese. Marital status: over 15, never married male 61.8%, female 58.2%. Never married male 31.8%, female 23.7%. 25 euro 29, never married male 69.3%, female 54.0%. 30 euro 34, never married male 42.9%, female 26.6%. Family and sex, according to a government survey, more than a quarter of unmarried men and women between the ages of 30 and 34 are virgins. 50% of men and women in Japan said they were not a Euro going out with a Euro. Vital statistics, live births, birth and death rates and overall fertility rate in Japan from 1899 to present. 2012 update, total fertility rate. Japan's total fertility rate in 2012 was estimated at 1.41 children per woman, increasing slightly from 1.32 in the 2001-05 period. In 2012, the highest TFR was 1.90, in Okinawa, and the lowest was 1.09, in Tokyo. TFR by prefecture for 2000-05, as well as future estimates, have been released. Migration. Internal migration, between 6 million and 7 million people moved their residences each year during the 1980s. About 50% of these moves were within the same prefecture. The others were relocations from one prefecture to another. During Japan's economic development in the 20th century, and especially during the 1950s and 1960s, migration was characterized by urbanization as people from rural areas in increasing numbers moved to the larger metropolitan areas in search of better jobs and education. Out-migration from rural prefectures continued in the late 1980s, but more slowly than in previous decades. In the 1980s, government policy provided support for new urban development away from the large cities, particularly Tokyo, and assisted regional cities to attract young people to live and work there. Regional cities offered familiarity to those from nearby areas, lower costs of living, shorter commutes, and, in general, a more relaxed lifestyle than could be had in larger cities. Young people continued to move to large cities, however, to attend universities and find work, but some returned to regional cities or to their prefecture of origin. Government statistics show that in the 1980s significant numbers of people left the largest central cities to move to suburbs within their metropolitan areas. In 1988 more than 500,000 people left Tokyo, which experienced a net loss through migration of nearly 73,000 for the year. Osaka had a net loss of nearly 36,000 in the same year. The prefectures showing the highest net growth are located near the major urban centers, such as Saitama, Chiba, Ibaraki, and Kanagawa around Tokyo, and Hyogo, Nara, and Shiga near Osaka and Kyoto. This pattern suggests a process of suburbanization, people moving away from the cities for affordable housing but still commuting there for work and recreation, rather than a true decentralization. More people in Japan like to live near coastal areas because they are easier to travel around in than the mountainous interior. Emigration. About 663,100 Japanese were living abroad, approximately 75,000 of whom had permanent foreign residency, more than 6 times the number who had that status in 1975. More than 200,000 Japanese went abroad in 1990 for extended periods of study, research, or business assignments. As the government and private corporations have stressed internationalization, greater numbers of individuals have been directly affected, decreasing Japan's historical insularity. By the late 1980s, these problems, particularly the bullying of returnee children in schools, had become a major public issue both in Japan and in Japanese communities abroad. Immigration. According to the Japanese Immigration Center, the number of foreign residents in Japan has steadily increased, and the number of foreign residents were more than 2.2 million people in 2008. In 2010, the number of foreigners in Japan was 2,134,151. There were 209,373 Filipinos, many of whom are married to Japanese nationals, 210,032 Brazilians, many of whom are of European descent rather than Japanese descent because in the case of a family only one member need have a claim to Japanese ancestry, 687,156 Chinese and 565,989 Koreans. Chinese, Filipinos, Koreans, and Brazilians account for about 69.5% of foreign residents in Japan. The number naturalizations peaked in 2008 at 16,000, declining to over 9,000 in the most recent year for which data is available. Most of the decline is accounted for by a steep reduction in the number of Japan-born Koreans taking Japanese citizenship. Historically, the bulk of those taking Japanese citizenship have not been foreign-born immigrants but rather Japanese-born descendants of Koreans and Taiwan Chinese who lost their citizenship in the Japanese Empire in 1947 as part of American occupation policy for Japan. The concept of the ethnic groups by the Japanese statistics is different from the ethnicity census of North American or some Western European statistics. For example, the UK census asks for ethnic or racial background, regardless of their nationalities. The Japanese Statistics Bureau, however, does not have this question. Since the Japanese population census asks the people's nationality rather than their ethnic background, naturalized Japanese citizens and Japanese nationals with multi-ethnic background are considered to be ethnically Japanese in the population census of Japan. Thus, although any casual inspection of the population reveals near-ethnic homogeneity, it is under one sense possible to describe the population as multi-ethnic, although any percentage of ethnic minorities is vanishingly small compared with the numbers in the UK, the United States, Canada, and other developed countries. Languages. The Japanese Society of Yamato people is linguistically homogeneous with small populations of Koreans, Chinese, Taiwanese, Filipino, Brazilians as well as Peruvians and Argentinians of both Latin American and Japanese descent. Japan has indigenous minority groups such as the Ainu and Ryukyuans, who generally speak Japanese. Japanese citizenship is conferred just sanguinis, and monolingual Japanese-speaking minorities often reside in Japan for generations under permanent residency status without acquiring citizenship in their country of birth, although legally they are allowed to do so. This is because Japanese law does not recognize dual citizenship, and so people becoming naturalized Japanese citizens must relinquish citizenship of other countries. Some ethnic Koreans and Chinese and their descendants do not wish to abandon this other citizenship. In addition, people taking Japanese citizenship must take a name using the Japanese character sets hiragana, katakana, and/or kanji. Names using Western alphabet, Korean characters, Arabic characters, etc. are not acceptable as legal names. Chinese characters are usually legally acceptable as nearly all Chinese characters are recognized as valid by the Japanese government. Phonetic transliterations of non-Japanese names using katakana are also legally acceptable. However, some naturalizing foreigners feel that becoming a Japanese citizen should mean that they have a Japanese name and that they should abandon their foreign name, and some foreign residents do not wish to do these although most special permanent resident Koreans and Chinese already use Japanese names, so this is not such an important factor. Nonetheless, some 10,000 Zainichi Koreans naturalize every year. Approximately 98.6% of the population is pure Japanese and 99% of the population speak Japanese as their first language. Non-ethnic Japanese in the past, and to an extent in the present, also live in small numbers in the Japanese archipelago. Society, lifestyle. Japanese people enjoy a high standard of living, and nearly 90% of the population consider themselves part of the middle class. However, many studies on happiness and satisfaction with life tend to find that Japanese people average relatively low levels of life satisfaction and happiness when compared with most of the highly developed world. The levels have remained consistent if not declining slightly over the last half-century. Japanese have been surveyed to be relatively lacking in financial satisfaction. The suicide rates per 100,000 in Japan in 2004 were 36.5 for men and 12.8 for women, the second highest in the OECD. In 2010, 32,000 Japanese committed suicide, which translates to an average of 88 Japanese suicides a day in 2010. Minorities. Hisabutsu Baraku. 3 native Japanese minority groups can be identified. The largest are the Hisabutsu-Baraku or discriminated communities, also known as the Barakumin. These descendants of pre-modern outcast hereditary occupational groups, such as butchers, leather workers, funeral directors, and certain entertainers, may be considered a Japanese analogue of India's Dalits. Discrimination against these occupational groups arose historically because of Buddhist prohibitions against killing and Shinto notions of pollution, as well as governmental attempts at social control. During the Tokugawa period, such people were required to live in special baraku and, like the rest of the population, were bound by sumptuary laws based on the inheritance of social class. The Meiji government abolished most derogatory names applied to these discriminated communities in 1871, but the new laws had little effect on the social discrimination faced by the former outcasts and their descendants. The laws, however, did eliminate the economic monopoly they had over certain occupations. The baraku continued to be treated as social outcasts and some casual interactions with the majority caste was perceived taboo until the era after World War II. Although members of these discriminated communities are physically indistinguishable from other Japanese, they often live in urban ghettos or in the traditional special hamlets in rural areas. Some attempt to pass as ordinary Japanese, but the checks on family background that are often part of marriage arrangements and employment applications make this difficult. Estimates of their number range from 2 to 4 million. Non-Barakumin Japanese claim that membership in these discriminated communities can be surmised from the location of the family home, occupation, dialect, or mannerisms and, despite legal equality, continued to discriminate against people they surmised to be members of this group. Past and current discrimination has resulted in lower educational attainment and socio-economic status among Hisabutsu-Baraku than among the majority of Japanese. Movements with objectives ranging from liberation to encouraging integration have tried to change this situation. Ryukyuans, the second largest minority group among Japanese citizens is the Ryukyuan people. They are primarily distinguished from their use of several distinct Ryukyuan languages, though use of Ryukyuan is dying out. The Ryukyuan people and language originated in the Ryukyu Islands, which are in Okinawa Prefecture. Though similar to Japanese culture in many ways, the Ryukyuan culture has had a much larger influence from China than other parts of Japan, due to its geographical position in relation to the east coast of China and the island of Taiwan. Ainu, the third largest minority group among Japanese citizens, is the Ainu, whose language is an isolate. Historically, the Ainu were an indigenous hunting and gathering population who occupied most of northern Honshu as late as the Nara period. As Japanese settlement expanded, the Ainu were pushed northward. By the Tokugawa shogunate, the Ainu were pushed into the island of Hokkaido. Characterized as remnants of a primitive circumpolar culture, the fewer than 20,000 Ainu in 1990 were considered racially distinct and thus not fully Japanese. Disease and a low birth rate had severely diminished their numbers over the past 2 centuries, and intermarriage had brought about an almost completely mixed population. Although no longer in daily use, the Ainu language is preserved in epics, songs, and stories transmitted orally over succeeding generations. Distinctive rhythmic music and dances and some Ainu festivals and crafts are preserved, but mainly in order to take advantage of tourism. Foreign residents. In 2005, there were 1,555,505 foreign residents permanently residing in Japan, representing 1.22% of the Japanese population. Foreign army personnel, of which there have been up 430,000 from the US and 40,000 BCOF in the immediate post-war years, are not included in the Japanese statistics of foreigners, nor is such personnel subject to local immigration controls. Particularly the US bases and the culture transmitted through them had a significant influence on Japanese fashions. Most Koreans in Japan today have never been to the Korean peninsula and do not speak Korean. A significant portion of these foreign residents are the descendants of illegal immigration of Koreans, a limited number of whom hold a special residence status, granted under the terms of the Normalization Treaty between South Korea and Japan. In many cases special residents, despite being born in Japan and only speaking Japanese, have chosen not to take advantage of Japan's mostly automatic granting of citizenship to special resident applicants. Beginning in 1947, the Japanese government started to deport those illegal Korean aliens, who were Japanese subjects. In particular, refugees from the massacres conducted by the Korean forces in what is termed the Jeju Uprising, were treated as smugglers, and frequently forcibly returned to Korea. When the Treaty of San Francisco came into force, all ethnic Koreans lost their Japanese citizenship and with it the right to welfare grants, to hold a government job of any kind or to attend Japanese schools. In the following year the government contrived, with the help of the Red Cross, a scheme to repatriate Korean residents, who mainly were from the southern provinces, to their home of North Korea. Between 1959 and 1984, 93,430 people used this route. 6,737 were Japanese or Chinese dependents. Most of these departures, 78,276, occurred before 1962. All non-Japanese without special residential status are required by law to register with the government and carry alien registration cards. From the early 1980s, a civil disobedience movement encouraged refusal of the fingerprinting that accompanied registration every 5 years. Opponents of fingerprinting argued that it was discriminatory because the only Japanese who were fingerprinted were criminals. The courts upheld fingerprinting, but the law was changed so that fingerprinting was done once rather than with each renewal of the registration, which until a law reform in 1989 was usually required every 6 months for anybody from the age of 16. Those refusing fingerprinting were denied re-entry permits, thus depriving them from freedom of movement. Koseki, Japanese citizens are recorded in Koseki and Jarminia systems, while foreign residents are only recorded in a separate alien registration system. From July 2012 a new registration system will be enacted. All residents will be recorded by municipal offices in the Jarminia system. The Japanese Family Register system will continue for Japanese citizens, whilst foreigners will be recorded in a separate residency management system administered by immigration offices which will combine previous immigration status and local alien registration systems. Foreigner Reporting Website and Hotline. The Japanese Ministry of Justice maintains a website and hotline for receiving report on illegal stay foreigner. The criteria for reporting include feeling anxious about a foreigner, and anonymous submissions are permitted. Japanese immigration authorities work in unison with police to investigate those reported, and human rights groups such as Amnesty International have argued that those reported do not receive proper legal protection. The Deo Kanjoku system allows police to detain suspects without charges, access to legal counsel or telephone calls for up to 23 days. In October 2006, the Foreigner Reporting Hotline's operating hours were extended to include Saturday, Sunday and national holidays. Fingerprinting foreigners when entering Japan. As of November 20, 2007, all foreigners entering Japan must be biometrically registered on arrival. This includes people living in Japan on visas as well as permanent residents, but excludes people with special permanent resident permission, diplomats, and those under 16. Immigration Control 2006, the Immigration Bureau, the Ministry of Justice, 2006. R-cubed I1/4 unregistered trademark R to the first C per mille euro oia epsilon 1/2 cca euro a registered trademark C unregistered trademark Ashara, E-cubed unregistered trademark COE epsilon 1/2 cca plus or minus euro, September 21, 2007. Religion. Shinto and Buddhism are Japan's two major religions. They have coexisted for several centuries. Most Japanese people generally do not exclusively identify themselves as adherents of only one religion, but rather incorporate various elements in a syncretic fashion. There are small Christian and Muslim minorities. Businesses for adults are growing in line with old population, such as diapers for adults. In 2012, the yearly sales of Unicham adult diapers slightly surpassed those for babies. See also, Ethnic issues in Japan, elderly people in Japan, Japanese people, aging of Japan, suicide in Japan, Shimoja, Nagano, a village whose birth rate is increasing. Historical, Demographics of Japan before Meiji Restoration, Demographics of Imperial Japan, References. This article incorporates a public domain material from websites or documents of the Library of Congress Country Studies. Japan, United Nations World Population Prospects. Data is for 2005. External links: Japan Population Census 2010, Expatriates in Japan, The Dilemma Posed by Japan's Population Decline, discussion paper by Julian Chappell in the Electronic Journal of Contemporary Japanese Studies, October 18, 2004. The Exodus to North Korea Museum, Another Tsunami Warning, Caring for Japan. Unregistered trademark S. Elderly, brief on what the future of Japan looks like for an increasingly aging population, and if this demographic transition is limited to Japan alone. Morita, Kairiro and Seisuke Assassin. The New Illegal Immigration in Japan, 1980–1992. International Migration Review, Volume 28, No. 1, ppA 153 €163.